I'm Karina Connor with Space Coast Daily, and we are live in the studios because today, in this day and age, with technology, at our fingertips, we think it's really important to bring you insights on how to protect yourself. So we are more than grateful today to have in the studio Miss Eveline.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello. Good to see you again.
I'm so happy that you're here again because this was a topic that was huge last year and it gave all the people the information. Now you are with Launch Credit Union.
Correct.
You are their fraud manager. You've been doing this a very long time.
About 10 years.
Yes. And you help protect so many individuals that are your customers.
Yes.
So today you get to help the masses and share some of that knowledge.
That's always a great idea.
Right? I mean, I can't wait to hear some of your stories. You've got lots of stories, don't you?
Yes, always.
So we're going to get into those stories. And so we're just going to start off, though, with these. I mean, my cell phone's right here, right? It's always ringing off the hook these days.
Correct.
Right? All of these random numbers. What are these? How does this happen? What are these numbers that keep calling? And how are there so many generated?
There's so many scams out there, Karina. I couldn't even begin to tell you, but I can tell you this. The most important thing, if you don't recognize the phone number, might be a good idea just to let it go to voicemail. And then if it's important, they'll leave a message and you can always call them back. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, they're using that phone call for phishing information. Right. They will sometimes get your voice, and then they use a technology called spoofing, and then that's where the artificial intelligence comes in. In fact, we had that experience with one of our own employees where she received a phone call. It was her daughter's phone number that came across the screen because her daughter's phone number is saved in her contact list. Right. And all she hears is, "Mom, help me, help me." And long story short, it was a scammer that had somehow, was able to get her daughter's voice. And long story short, had her husband not been there, I think our own employee would have went and tried to withdraw funds. Wow. Thinking that her daughter was in trouble. When in reality, her daughter was home with her husband. So
that's serious.
Very.
Wow. I mean, I'm just thinking of these random, insurance, Medicaid, this and that. But so people are actually able to do that.
That's the artificial intelligence.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the blessing and the curse of it all, right?
Yes,
it's helping
it
us
is.
in so many ways, but it's also opening us up for more
scams, more threats.
Exactly.
Definitely. That's happening a lot. We get those calls quite often. The spoofing of the phone number is probably a big one. Right. You get a phone call, it appears to be from a government agency, and all of a sudden, they're telling you that they've intercepted a box with drugs and money, and they're going to arrest you, and they need you to go withdraw your money. Yep. And you go to the financial institution, you withdraw a large amount of money, and then they're asking you to deposit it in a Bitcoin machine.
Wow.
Yeah. Or you're going to put it in a box, you're going to wrap it up in aluminum foil, put it in a box and mail it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Launch does a really great job on the front line where we mitigate that a little bit by asking a lot of questions. And we always tell our members, we're not trying to ask them too many questions as to what they're doing with their money. Nobody won't, that's kind of private. But at the end of the day, we're trying to protect them from themselves. So it's unfortunate that these calls that come in and you think they're government agencies, they're really a scammer.
Right.
So
why don't we get into that? Now, we obviously we touched on and covered, if you don't recognize the phone number, have it go to voicemail. These days, people are also just requesting a text, which I think is which is also very convenient. Yeah. But let's say they did get a call from someone. How do you decipher if this is something that's legitimate? Like, for instance, if you were at Launch Credit Union, or if you had a call or you were trying to, help someone with the banking information, how do you?
So one of those calls could be a text message that appears that it's, we'll use Launch Credit Union, it's a text message and it'll say, it appears you have fraud on your account, hit this link.
Okay.
I'm not telling you that there's not going to be the debit card that sends you a link, but if the link sends you to another site and they're asking for information, or they're asking you for a CVV code, which is the 3-digit code on the back of that debit card, or the full account number, now you know you have a problem, right? Or if they're asking you to call in, and you call in and they're telling you they're going to send you a code, it's important to always read that message before you give the code. Especially on ours, it tells you that if someone is verbally asking you for that code, it's fraud. It's a fraudster. Hang up the phone at that point and call us immediately. But it happens quite often, and unfortunately, when we go back and talk to our victims, you know, our own members, and we tell them, can you read that code? You know, read that message to us. They're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that message. I just gave them the code. I had fraud, you know. So.
Yeah, so it's like you always have to be on alert these days.
Correct.
You know? And I think the bottom line too is if you are someone's financial institution, you have that information, and that's not the kind of information you'll be asking for.
Correct.
Right.
That's correct.
It's more security questions, right? It's things like that.
Right.
And I think we've talked about before. Another great method is you can hang up and call back, right?
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
That's another one.
Yeah.
So.
You never want to give out any personal information. You know, these scammers will ask you for your social security number. They'll ask you for the CVV code on the back of the card. They'll ask you as much information as they can. And unfortunately, it doesn't take them long before you take someone with like an 800 credit score. And that credit score, I've seen it in 60 days go down to like a 550. And it does not take long.
And the mess to try to clean that up.
The mess is huge. Yeah.
Now, and there's other situations, right, where maybe you've got a 401k, maybe you've got different things, right? And so, I mean, what are some other things that happen, or what are some other possibilities where people are feeling it's safe to share their credentials, but it's not?
You know, one of the things we find is that we have our members, and we'll say, just because you have money in a 401k or in an investment doesn't mean you should not check on it once a week.
Okay.
Right? Because even though it's in a 401k and we may not have access, we're not old enough to have access to it, maybe we haven't reached that retirement age, it does not mean that a scammer didn't get to it, right? So you always want to check it, make sure your balances are correct, make sure there's no movement of money that you weren't expecting to move. It's always a good idea to just, at minimum, once a week, look at all of your accounts. I wanted to go back on the phone thing. One thing we've seen a lot lately is, and when I say a lot, it's a lot because it's a big type of fraud, but it's called SIM swapping.
SIM swapping?
SIM swapping's scary. So basically your phone stops working, and you don't realize that there's something, especially if you're not a person that gets a lot of phone calls, maybe a retiree that doesn't really get a lot of phone calls, the phone stops working, and what's happened is that they've called the carrier and ported it to another carrier. So now they've basically, everything on your phone is now on another phone. So if they're resetting passwords or getting that multi-factor authentication, it's going to somebody else. So that's important to always pay attention, whether, do you get a daily phone call from maybe a family member and you didn't get it that day? Is your phone working? Is your phone properly working? We've had a couple cases like that, and unfortunately, by the time one of our victims realized it, they had moved money around from different banks. They had applied for several credit cards and opened other accounts at other financial institutions. So, and that was probably over a period of a week, because now you're calling your phone carrier and you're saying, what's going on? My phone's not working, and there's a delay there in fixing that. And that delay has just allowed that scammer to take advantage of it.
Completely overhaul.
Completely, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. God, pretty scary
these
stuff.
Conversations always make me so scared, I tend to like to live my life in rose-colored glasses, but always be alert, right?
Yes.
And you did touch on something that, we love our seniors, we love them, and, we love our parents, we love our grandparents.
Yes.
But I do feel like they're one of the biggest targets in a lot of these situations. I know that my grandmother really appreciates any time that we get on the phone, and sometimes I'm in this busy hustle and bustle life, and, they're kind of in a slow pace, so sometimes they take those phone calls, they take those conversations, right?
They do.
So I think as a caregiver, too, it's always important, whether you're a senior that's watching this or you're someone that, cares for your parents and grandparents, to have these conversations. you know, and to just to stay up to date, because as technology progresses, it makes things easier. It's just making us more susceptible to a lot of different attacks.
Yes, and once you're a victim and you're an easy target, unfortunately, they come back around.
Really?
It's not the same way, but they do come back around.
Wow.
You know, there's the, let's talk about the computer, right? A lot of our seniors are on the computer during the day. They're on Facebook and they're on social media, and that's a little scary too,
Right.
you know, because they're out there, and a lot of people put their information out on social media. They'll, on Facebook, they update whether they had a death in the family or something of the sort, and then all of a sudden a long lost friend that knew this family member is reaching out, and you're in a vulnerable state. You know, you've lost a loved one, and now there's someone reaching out to you, and they're going to give you all sorts of comfort. Before you know it, it's probably 2, 3, 4 weeks later, you're in love with this person. And now we're going to talk about romance scams, right?
Yes.
Romance scams are an interesting thing.
Right, especially with all the dating apps these days. There's so many.
There's a lot of them, for sure. So the scary thing is that when someone approaches you on Facebook, people don't really think that that's a scammer. They truly believe that they know this person from high school or from their past somewhere. And in reality, they're a total stranger. They've never even seen them, you know. And they will go to the branch, they'll withdraw money, and again, mail it out. Or they want to help the person get back from overseas. It's just an unfortunate thing, you know. So.
Now, I'm sure you have even more insights on here. I mean, I know people who are a little more alert and who have fun with these people on Messenger, on Facebook, right? You know, and just really and try to walk them into a corner. And then even my grandmother, I remember she used to be on. She used to do the dating websites, right?
Yeah.
And she would look for language, right? And grammar.
Correct.
So that's
Yes.
that's a big thing. I know that in some of these messaging and these apps, to really look for that, because that's a big indicator.
It is a big indicator, but also keeping in mind, because I've played with that too, right? Because when I first started doing this, I just couldn't understand how you could fall in love with somebody over the internet so fast. So I started toying with it, and they could really wrap you up. You know, especially if you're going through a vulnerable time.
Exactly.
You have to know when to stop and back out of it. That's for sure. And the minute you start talking about finances and everything, there's so many ways that conversation can go that there's been a lot of victims that have lost their life savings. So, and that's the sad part about it.
It's terrible. It's so scary, right? Now, how are some ways that you can prevent some of these things? Maybe we should go into some of like the tips and tricks for people, because that's really why we're here. There's so many different ways that people can, you know, attack you. But let's talk a little about consumer protection.
So let's talk about that. The computer, going back to that computer.
Right.
Everybody likes being on the computer. But there is scams out there that all of a sudden you're on the computer, a screen pops up, and it says you have a virus. And then it says, call this number on the screen. You call the number, and they want remote access to your computer. I'm going to tell you that when you remote access into someone's computer, the financial institution doesn't have the ability to see that, because they're using your IP address, right? So they can't see that someone else is in your computer. So there's no way for the financial institution to be alerted of that.
So for saved passwords and all these things.
Correct, correct. So now what they're going to tell you is that maybe it's Microsoft, right? Microsoft is helping you, and they're going to just take a look at your computer, and all of a sudden they go, oh my gosh, you know, the fee for this is $499, but we ended up putting $49,000 in your account, and we need you to wire the money out. And what they do is because they've remote accessed into the computer, they're now in your bank accounts, right? And they can see your balances. And if you have a high balance, it's just going to depend on your balances. They're going to move money, correct. They're going to move money from your savings to your checking, but you're only seeing the one screen, which makes it appear as though there's a lot of money in there, and you're going, oh wow, I owe this person money.
Oh, okay. That's the other side. So they're like, whatever. I can't think of the word, but yeah, they're showing you what they want you to see. It's not just them coming in to your computer.
Yeah.
Wow.
So again, they visit the branch and they want to withdraw the large amount of money because they have to send it to somebody. So we do ask a lot of questions, what you're doing with the money and whatnot.
Yeah, especially when it's a big random
Yes.
withdrawal, and that's getting into it too. You are with Launch Credit Union.
Yes.
Just to remind everyone,
Yes.
this is Eveline, and she is the fraud manager with Launch Credit Union. In addition to all the services that they offer their customers, this is a huge one.
It is a huge one. I recently actually did some public speaking at a particular place, and there was a member there, and she says, "Oh my gosh, I remember the teller asking me all these questions. I was so upset, but now I appreciate you doing that."
Right.
And the whole reasoning was because one of the things that the scammer will tell the member is, well, just go in there, withdraw the money, and tell them you're doing a remodel or you're getting a new roof. Well, we go through a series of questions, and they can't even answer the questions. So at that point, I mean, let's face it, right? At the end of the day, we can't really stop you from taking your money.
Of course
but
not.
I'm going to do everything that I can to keep you from taking your money.
Yeah, to protect your members.
Correct.
Which is huge, because I mean, the mess that
It's
they're going to
huge.
deal with after that, you don't get that back. I mean,
You cannot get it back.
I think I personally too, if there's any sort of, if anything requires me taking out money and wiring it in any sort of a wry way, it's, to me, that's a huge red flag. If there's if there is a cashier's check, if there is any way not to track it back to me, if there's no way to, like, even electronically,
Correct.
that's a huge deal. That everyone needs to be to get with these days.
For sure.
We can't be naive this day and age with how open we are with our tech.
Exactly.
I mean, with AI.
Artificial
I mean,
intelligence.
it's all the capabilities it's been able to do for us. It can write business proposals, it can write resumes, but it's also can be.
It's good, and it's really bad.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay, well, why don't we end with, I want to hear a good story. Can you tell me a good story?
Oh my gosh,
Not a good story.
So many.
It's a scare. Our goal here is to help scare and protect you here, as to make you good consumers here, right? So.
Yes, a good story would be hitting a link on your computer and realizing that you're now talking to a scammer, and luckily the other person, family member in the home, realizes something isn't right, right? And the biggest thing that they did, which was the best thing that they could have done at that moment, was to shut the computer and to disconnect, right? Because unplug it. Yes, disconnect it, right? Because they're going to drop malware on there, and and I remember this particular situation that coming into the branch, and I thought this family member was going to kill him, right? Because it was a lot of money that was moving quickly, and she could see that it was moving quickly, and it doesn't matter what you do for a living, doesn't matter how smart we are or anything, they're smarter than we are. So you always have to be on your A game when you're going to be on any form of technology.
Most definitely, and I can actually, I've shared this before, I've been in a couple of these exact same situations in my lifetime, from looking for a rental, and the rental being real and the picture being on there. It was on Craigslist. I drove by the house. It was all real, but they wanted a deposit and a wire transfer. There was some grammar that was off, And also with the Microsoft, I was on a computer. It was acting a little weird. I thought I was calling Microsoft, and then all of a sudden someone had remote access in my computer, and it just felt wrong. Again, luckily my intuition was peaking. And I just disconnected, turned it off, and everything. But so it's a very real situations that we are talking about here today. And I'm very happy you're in here in the studio being able to share it with the masses here at Space Coast Daily. But what I'm also gathering is, if you really, if you want to protect your money, you want to be with a financial institution that also wants to protect your money.
Yes.
And Launch Credit Union is a local credit union, constantly trying to progress and evolve and help its members. So,
and let's talk about the local, right? Because there's phone calls out there that. There's phone calls that are coming through with the spoofing we talked about earlier on.
Yes.
And they identify themselves as Launch Credit Union.
Okay.
We're not out of another state. We're here local. If someone calls you and they want all that information, hang up the phone and call us, right? Do not let someone download anything. Do not give them any information that we already have. We don't need your CVV code, the 3-digit code on the back of the card.
Right.
We don't need your social security number. We don't need anything. If we are calling you, we're going to ask you other verifying questions. So it's definitely important to understand that those calls are out there, and it's happening to a lot of financial institutions, and we're just trying to take that proactive approach to get the message out there that we're not going to ask you for personal information. We're not going to ask you for that multi-factor authentication code. There's a reason why that message is so direct, and it says, if someone is asking you for this, it's a fraudster, hang up.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you can't get any more direct than that.
I think
for sure.
in general, when in doubt, hang up, call back on a number that you know.
Correct.
And then also, when in doubt, hang up and go to your financial institution. Luckily, I mean, how many there's many locations right now for Launch Credit Union all throughout the Space Coast and beyond.
Correct.
So there is one close enough that, it's worth protecting yourself.
Yes.
And not to mention all of the lovely warm faces and stuff that are there for you, right?
Exactly.
So.
Yeah.
Well, once again, Eveline, is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrapped up here today?
Most importantly, regardless of who you bank with, if you get a phone call, you want to notify your financial institution immediately. Don't download any information. Don't share any information. We are in that day and age. Unfortunately, you have to look at your accounts more than once a week.
Yeah.
I say minimum once a week. But I can tell you that there was a time back in the day that you could look at it when your statements came in. Your paper statements came in, you verified it then. You can't do that anymore. You can't wait that long. You really need to look at it probably 2-3 times a week. So.
And I like that too. When in doubt, just call your financial institution, put them on alert too.
Correct.
If you're on alert, put you on alert. That way,
that's correct.
It doesn't mean you're going to freeze your funds. It doesn't, it's not going to set you back. It's just you have an extra layer of protection, especially with you guys. I mean, you guys have a whole department that you look. That's what you do every day.
That's what we do
right?
every day. Every day.
You spend your days making sure that everything is safe. So
I think one more thing I want to touch on is if you are a parent or a grandparent and you get that phone call that says that someone's in trouble, and you want to make sure to stop and think about that and pick up the phone and call that family member.
Yes.
Right? Because oftentimes you're given these instructions, you're now in a panic, and as a parent myself, I know that I'd be in a panic. But you got to really stop and think about it and call that person.
Yeah, your fight or flight kind of kicks in there.
Correct.
But verify, cross-check, analyze. That's something I like to live by.
Yes. And if the teller is asking you a question or the banker is asking you a question, just answer their questions. We don't care what you do with your money, but we do want to protect you from losing your money. It's really important.
Right. We're all in such a fast-paced world. We're all trying to get things done, run to the bank and do that, but it is there to help you.
Correct.
And especially, that's why we put this. We put it in people's hands to help us. So.
Yeah. That's
well,
it.
thanks once
You're
again
welcome.
for having us here in the
Thank you.
studio. This
Thank
has
you for having
been
me.
tremendously educational, and I feel safer even now leaving here and just being on alert. Always being on alert. So we look forward to having you again, and we look forward to sharing this with the Space Coast community. And guys, what's the best way to find Launch Credit Union if they want some more information and to find more?
You can always reach us on launchcu.com. Visit one of our local branches. You can always call in as well to our local number.
Yeah.
So
wonderful. Yep. And you can click on the link in this article if you would like for more information. There's plenty of services that Launch Credit Union offers. This is just one, and we're so happy that you were here today to share all this information with us. So thanks once again.
Thank you.
All right. Stay safe, Space Coast.